The convoy was already on fire when the first scream cut through the radios. Not a shout. Not a command. A scream. Black smoke rolled across the road like a living thing, choking the air, stinging eyes, turning everything into silhouettes. A Humvee burned on its side, tires melting, ammunition popping inside the wreck like distant thunder. Marines were pinned behind twisted metal and shattered concrete, bullets cracking past their helmets, too close, too fast. Someone yelled for a medic. Someone else was praying. Near the rear of the column, their designated marksman lay on his back, blood soaking through his shoulder, his rifle just out of reach, half buried in dust and glass. He tried to crawl. He couldn't. A gunnery sergeant grabbed the rifle, spun, and roared into the chaos. "Any sharpshooters here?" No one answered. Not a word. Not a hand. Not a breath. Then, from behind a burned supply crate, a small figure stepped forward. She was quiet. Too quiet. Her helmet was scuffed, her vest marked Upley, her hands still shaking from hauling ammo boxes minutes earlier. Someone laughed. Another voice muttered, "You?" A third barked, "Get back in your lane, sweetheart." She froze, heat on her face, the entire convoy staring. And in that moment, no one believed she could save them. Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to FOB Veteran Stories so you never miss these true tales of courage. And tell us in the comments, where are you watching from today? Her name was Private First Class Mara Kincaid, and she was 23 years old. If you asked most of the Marines in that unit, they would have stared at you for a second, then guessed wrong. Some would have called her Supply. Others would have pointed with a thumb and said, "That girl who does the manifests." One of them, once, had called her Clipboard, like that was her actual name. Mara never corrected anybody. She had learned early that the fastest way to stay safe was to stay small. In the mornings, while the others checked weapons, joked too loud, and argued about who had to ride shotgun, Mara stood at the tailgate with her pen and her laminated sheets, reading off serial numbers and ammo counts like a metronome. 556, 762. Smoke grenades, water, batteries, tourniquets. She said it all in a steady voice, never rushing, never stumbling. And nobody listened until something was missing. Then they would turn on her like she had personally stolen it. "Hey, Supply, where's my extra mags? Hey, Clipboard, you lose my radio batteries again? Hey, you even know what you're doing back there?" Mara would swallow the heat in her throat and answer the same way every time. Calm. Specific. No emotion. 3 magazines issued. 2 on your vest. 1 in your pack. Batteries are in the 3rd crate, labeled comms. The manifest matches what we signed out. She spoke like facts could protect her. Sometimes they did. Most of the time, they didn't. She lived in the spaces nobody wanted. The corners of tents. The back seat. The shadow behind the motor pool where the sun never reached the concrete. At chow, she ate fast, sitting at the end of a table if there was room, or standing if there wasn't. She kept her eyes on her tray and her shoulders slightly forward, like she was always bracing for someone to bump her on purpose. Nobody invited her into the stories. Nobody asked where she was from. Nobody asked why she joined. They didn't hate her. Not really. They just didn't see her. And for months, Mara had been grateful for that. Because being seen meant being questioned. Being questioned meant being known. And being known meant someone might notice the part of her she was trying to bury, the part that had nothing to do with Supply. She kept her hair tight under her cover, no loose strands, no softness. Her uniform always looked like it had been pressed, even when everything else was dust and sweat. Her hands were small but not delicate, knuckles slightly rough, nails cut down to nothing. When she worked, she moved with a certain quiet economy, like every motion had been practiced until it became invisible. The strangest thing, if anyone bothered to look, was her breathing. In a place where everyone lived on adrenaline, Mara didn't. Even when mortars fell in the distance, even when the base alarms wailed at night, even when a convoy rolled out with that heavy silence that always came before violence, Mara's breath stayed slow. In through the nose. Out through the mouth. Controlled, like she was counting without counting. Sometimes she would pause by the HESCO barriers at dusk and stare into the desert like she was listening to something the rest of them couldn't hear. Her eyes weren't dreamy. They were measuring. Distance. Angle. Movement. Then she'd blink, like waking up, and go back to her job. The first time Corporal Travis Rourke noticed her, it wasn't because she spoke. It was because she didn't. Rourke was the kind of Marine who filled every space with his voice. Broad shoulders. Loud laugh. Quick to mock, quicker to shove. He wore his confidence like armor, and he treated anyone outside his circle like a target that existed for his entertainment. He caught Mara one morning near the supply cage. A skinny stray dog had wandered into the motor pool, ribs showing, tail tucked, eyes wild with hunger. Mara had crouched down, torn a piece of her ration bar in half, and slid it across the gravel. The dog hesitated, then ate like it hadn't seen food in days. Rourke walked up right as Mara's hand pulled back. He stared at the dog. Then at her. "You feeding pets now?" he said, loud enough for two other Marines to hear. "This, a petting zoo? Supply?" Mara stood up slowly, brushing dust from her knees. "It's hungry," she said. Rourke smirked like she'd told a joke. "Cute," he said. "You know what else is hungry? The guys who actually fight. Maybe worry about them." One of the Marines behind him chuckled. Mara's face stayed neutral, but something in her eyes tightened for a second, like a shutter closing. She didn't argue. She didn't snap back. She just stepped past him with her box cutter and her clipboard, like his words were wind. That made him hate her more. Because Marines like Rourke didn't just want a reaction, they needed one. And Mara refused to give it. The convoy commander, Gunnery Sergeant Cole Maddox, saw the whole thing from across the lot. Maddox wasn't a loud leader. He didn't do speeches. He didn't do theatrics. He had a lined face, a calm stare, and the kind of voice that didn't need to be raised to cut through a room. When he walked, Marines shifted without being told. He didn't step in and scold Rourke. He did something else. He looked at Mara for a long moment, like he was trying to understand what kind of Marine could take that kind of disrespect and not crack. Then he nodded once, small and almost unnoticeable, and went back to checking the convoy schedule. It wasn't kindness. It wasn't praise. But it was the first time anyone with rank had looked at Mara like she mattered. Mara noticed. She noticed everything. She noticed who carried fear behind jokes. She noticed who couldn't sleep. She noticed the way some Marines polished their rifles when they were anxious, the way others picked fights when they felt powerless. She noticed the way Rourke's hands shook sometimes when he thought no one was watching. And she noticed the weight of the rifle rack every time she walked past it. That was the cruel part. The thing she was hiding wasn't gone. It was right there. Every day. Just waiting. Mara had chosen supply because it came with shadows, because it came with numbers and paper and crates, because nobody expected anything heroic from the person counting magazines, because if she stayed invisible long enough, maybe the past would stay buried with her. Maybe the part of her that could do more than count could finally die quietly. But war has a way of dragging truth into the open, whether you're ready or not. She never wanted to be noticed, but war does not care what you want. The first blast didn't sound like an explosion. It sounded like the sky ripping open. The ground bucked under the convoy, throwing Mara against the side of a supply truck hard enough to rattle her teeth. The world filled with dust, heat, and the sharp metallic taste of panic. Radios screamed all at once. Overlapping voices, broken commands, someone yelling coordinates that no one could hear. Contact left. Contact right. Contact front. Mara dropped without thinking, flattening herself behind a crate as rounds snapped overhead, cracking through the air like whips. Shrapnel clattered across the asphalt. Someone was shouting for smoke. Someone was screaming a name. She didn't know whose. She didn't need to. The convoy had been hit. Hard. Mara pressed her back to the crate, heart hammering, breath steady despite the chaos. She counted without meaning to. In, out. In, out. Her hands curled into the gravel, feeling each tiny stone, anchoring herself to something solid. Up ahead, one of the gunners slumped in his seat, helmet rolling loose. A Marine dragged him out by his vest, blood soaking through his sleeve. A medic skidded in beside him, hands already red, voice sharp and focused. Stay with me. Stay with me. Look at me. Another explosion punched the air, closer this time. Someone went down near the second Humvee, clutching their leg, screaming for help. Another Marine tried to reach him and got knocked flat by a concussive wave that rattled every bone in Mara's body. The radios wouldn't stop. Where's our overwatch? Marksman's down. Repeat, marksman is down. Mara turned her head slowly, peering through the smoke. She saw him. Lance Corporal Reed, their designated marksman, lay on his side near the rear of the column, one arm pinned beneath him, the other pressed to his shoulder. Blood soaked into the dirt beneath him, dark and spreading. His rifle lay a few feet away, half covered by dust. He tried to crawl. He couldn't. Someone dragged him back behind cover, his boots leaving a streak in the dirt. Rifles down, someone yelled. We're blind, blind. That word hit harder than the explosions. Mara's eyes flicked to the rifle. Then away. Then back again. Gunnery Sergeant Maddox was already moving. He grabbed the rifle, crouched behind the hood of a disabled truck, and scanned the street through the smoke. He didn't waste time yelling orders no one could follow. He waited until there was a small pocket of silence between blasts. Then he shouted, "Any sharpshooters here?" The question ripped through the chaos like a flare. For a second, nothing happened. No hands. No voices. No movement. Marines exchanged looks, their faces tight, calculating. A few shook their heads. A few looked down. Nobody looked at Mara. She felt it. The absence of attention was louder than any insult. Maddox shouted again, louder this time. I said, "Any sharpshooters?" Mara's fingers twitched. Her mouth went dry. She stood up. Not fast. Not dramatic. Just one step forward from behind the crate, hands open, heart pounding against her ribs. I can. Her voice barely made it out. Someone laughed. Not a nervous laugh. A real one? You? Rourke's voice cut through the smoke, sharp and disbelieving. You're kidding, right? Another Marine snorted. That's supply. Yeah, someone else added. She counts bullets. She doesn't shoot them. Mara stood there, heat crawling up her neck, the weight of their eyes pressing into her skin. Maddox stared at her, unreadable. You serious? Rourke said, stepping forward. This isn't a range day. People are dying. Mara opened her mouth. Closed it. She didn't argue. She didn't explain. She didn't beg. She just stood there. Rourke took another step, blocking her line of sight to the sergeant. Get back behind cover, he snapped. You'll get yourself killed. And probably one of us, another Marine added. The laughter faded. It turned into murmurs. Low, uncertain. This isn't funny. She's gonna get us killed. Does she even know how to chamber a round? Mara felt every word like a physical thing, pressing into her chest. She could have spoken. She could have said everything. She could have told them what she knew. What she was. What she had been. She didn't. Her hands stayed still at her sides. Her breathing stayed even. Maddox looked from her to the rifle. Then back to her. Where'd you learn to shoot? He asked. Mara met his eyes. She said nothing. Rourke scoffed. See? She doesn't even have an answer. Another blast rattled the street. A chunk of concrete shattered, spraying dust and debris. A Marine cried out, clutching his face. Maddox swore under his breath. He looked at the rifle again, then at Mara. "You got a qualification?" he asked. She nodded once. Rourke laughed. "On what? A video game?" That one stung. Mara's jaw tightened. Still, she said nothing. The murmurs grew louder. "This is insane. He's not actually considering this. We're running out of time." Maddox closed his eyes for a second. Then he opened them. "What would you have done in that moment?" the narrator would later ask. "Would you have spoken? Would you have walked away?" Maddox exhaled slowly. "Get down," he told Rourke. Rourke stared at him. "Gunny? Get down," Maddox repeated, his voice flat. Rourke hesitated, then stepped aside, shaking his head like he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Maddox held the rifle out. Mara didn't rush for it. She walked. Each step felt heavier than the last, like she was moving through water. Every Marine watched her now. Not with laughter, with doubt, with fear, with the kind of attention she had spent months avoiding. She reached for the rifle. Rourke moved. Not fully conscious, not planned. He grabbed her wrist. "Don't," he said, low and urgent. "You don't want this." Mara froze. Her fingers curled slightly, instinctively, not in fear, but in habit. She looked at his hand on her wrist, then at his face. For the first time, she spoke. "I do," she said. Not loud, not dramatic. Just true. Rourke stared at her like he didn't recognize her. Maddox stepped forward and tore Rourke's hand away. "That's enough," he said. Gunfire cracked close, splintering the hood of the truck beside them. Maddox shoved the rifle into Mara's hands. "Prove it," he said. "Now." Her fingers wrapped around the grip. Everything else fell away. The shouting. The explosions. The stares. She dropped to one knee without thinking, tucking herself into cover like she had done it 1,000 times. Her cheek settled against the stock. Her breathing slowed. In. Out. She glanced down the street. She saw what the others hadn't. Mara didn't smile. She didn't hesitate. She adjusted the scope. And for the first time since the ambush began, someone finally saw her. She picked up the rifle. Mara didn't hold the rifle like someone who had just been handed a stranger's weapon. She held it like something she had been missing. Her fingers slid along the stock, not searching, not guessing. They went exactly where they were supposed to. She checked the chamber with a quick, practiced motion, not rushed, not cautious, just certain. Her thumb brushed the safety, her palm tested the balance, and she shifted the sling without being told. A few Marines noticed. They didn't say anything at first. They just watched. She rolled her shoulder once, slow and deliberate, then settled into position behind the truck's twisted frame. Her knee dropped, her foot angled, her spine straightened in a way that made the recoil line clean to her body. It wasn't stiff. It wasn't showy. It was efficient. Like she had done this before. Like she had done it a lot. Maddox crouched beside her, keeping low. "You good?" he asked. Mara didn't look at him. She was already adjusting the scope. Not fiddling, not experimenting. Correcting. One click. Then another. Then she stopped. Her breathing changed, not faster. Slower. It wasn't the shallow, panicked breath of someone under fire. It was deep, controlled, almost peaceful. In through her nose. Out through her mouth. Each exhale measured, each inhale steady. A Marine behind them leaned closer to another and whispered, "Why's she breathing like that?" "No idea," the other whispered back. "It's weird." Mara tilted her head slightly, listening. Not to them, to the wind. Dust drifted across the street in thin sheets, pushed by small, inconsistent gusts that bounced between shattered buildings. She watched it like someone reading a language. Then she spoke. "How far?" she asked. Her voice was calm, too calm. Maddox blinked. "What?" "Distance," she said. "To the rooftop, second building, left of the collapsed sign." He stared at her. Hold," he said, lifting his binoculars. Rourke scoffed from behind a wheel. "She's guessing." Maddox checked. Then checked again. 460 meters, he said. Mara nodded once. She dialed the scope. Didn't count. Didn't hesitate. Just turned it. One of the Marines whispered, "How did she know where I was looking?" Mara shifted slightly, her elbow digging into the dirt, her weight redistributing with subtle precision. She tested the trigger with a feather-light press, not enough to fire, just enough to feel. She exhaled. Then stopped breathing altogether. Someone else noticed that. "She just stopped," a Marine murmured. "She's holding her breath." Maddox stared at her, something uneasy creeping into his expression. "Where did you learn that?" he asked. Mara didn't answer. She was watching a shadow move across a rooftop. She didn't flinch when rounds cracked nearby. She didn't blink when debris scattered. She just tracked. Her body wasn't tense. It was ready. Rourke leaned closer, eyes narrowed. "Hey, I asked you something. Where did you learn that?" Mara didn't turn. Didn't look at him. Didn't acknowledge him. Her world had narrowed to a single line of sight. Maddox followed her gaze. "What do you see?" he asked. "Two shooters," she said. "One moving, one waiting. How do you know?" someone asked. Mara adjusted her cheek on the stock, just a fraction. "The one who's waiting isn't afraid," she said. "He's covering." Silence followed, not stunned silence. Confused silence. "How can you tell?" a Marine whispered. Mara didn't respond. She whispered something else instead. "Wind is inconsistent, quartering left to right. Stronger near the intersection." Maddox stared at her. "How do you?" "I need a range on the intersection," she said. Maddox checked again. 600, she nodded. She dialed again. Someone behind them whispered, "She's not guessing." Another whispered, "She's not even thinking." Rourke's voice came out quieter this time. "This is not normal." Mara shifted her grip. Her finger rested against the trigger. Not squeezing. Waiting. A Marine crawled up beside Maddox. "Gunny if she misses." "She won't," Maddox said. He didn't know why he said it, but he did. Mara's breathing slowed again. Her shoulders relaxed. Her jaw unclenched. For a moment, the battlefield seemed to bend around her stillness. She wasn't afraid. She was focused. And that scared them more than panic ever could. Maddoxa leaned closer. "Mara," he said, "if you're wrong..." She cut him off. "I'm not," she said, "not arrogant." "Certain," a Marine whispered. "Who is she?" No one answered. Because no one knew. Not really. Mara adjusted her aim a final fraction of an inch. She didn't smile. She didn't boast. She didn't announce. She just waited. And everyone watching her felt it at the same time. This was not luck. This was memory. Mara exhaled. The world narrowed to a thin, invisible line between her eye and the distant rooftop. The chaos didn't disappear, but it dulled. Explosions became distant thunder. Shouting turned into static. The smell of smoke and burning rubber faded into something she didn't have words for. All that remained was the wind, the angle, the distance, and the small moving shape behind shattered concrete. Her finger pressed. The rifle cracked. Not a dramatic boom. Not a cinematic roar. Just a sharp, controlled sound that barely rose above the chaos. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the figure on the rooftop dropped. Not fell. Dropped. Like someone had cut a wire. A Marine gasped. Another swore under his breath. Someone leaned forward, disbelief written across their face. That, one of them started. No one finished the sentence. Maddox lifted his binoculars, hands suddenly unsteady. He looked. Then he looked again. Target down, he said, quieter than before. Rourke froze. He stared at the rooftop, then at Mara, then back again. That was luck, he said. Too fast. Too forced. Too forced. Anybody could have hit that. Mara didn't react. She was already shifting. Her body moved like water, smooth and deliberate. She adjusted her position, not because she had to, but because it was time. Another silhouette appeared. She tracked it. She inhaled. She exhaled. Crack. The second shot landed before the first echo faded. Another body dropped. No flourish. No hesitation. Just gone. A Marine whispered, "No way." Someone else murmured, "She didn't even pause." Rourke shook his head. Coincidence. That's coincidence. Mara didn't look at him. She didn't look at anyone. Her cheek stayed pressed to the stock. Her eye never left the scope. She spoke again. "Two more moving," she said. Left alley. One crouched. One standing. Maddox didn't question her. He just raised his binoculars. Holy. He stopped himself. She's right, Mara fired. 1, 2. The alley went still. The murmurs around her faded into something else. Not laughter, not doubt. Something heavier. Someone crawled closer to her, staying low. It was Hastings, the youngest Marine in the convoy, barely 20, eyes wide and face pale. "You need water?" he asked. Mara didn't look away from the scope. "Yes," she said. Not desperate, not rushed. Just factual. Hastings scrambled back, grabbed a canteen, then returned, uncapping it with shaking hands. He held it up to her lips without thinking. Mara took a small sip. Then another. "Thanks," she said. Hastings swallowed hard and crawled back to cover. No one laughed at him. No one mocked him. They were all watching her now. A Marine beside her started feeding her fresh magazines, one after another, sliding them into her reach without being told. His hands were trembling. Maddox noticed. He didn't stop it. He didn't correct it. He let it happen. Because something had shifted. The radio crackled. "Second squad pinned." Mara's head tilted slightly. "Where?" she asked. "Behind the bus," someone said. "They can't move." Mara scanned. She found them. She saw the angle immediately. She didn't comment on how narrow it was. She didn't mention the debris. She didn't say it was risky. She just calculated. Her finger tightened. Crack. The shot clipped the edge of a broken wall, sparking fragments outward. A second later, a distant scream cut through the noise. Then silence. "Clear," someone whispered. Maddox stared at her, not with shock. With something like unease. "How are you doing this?" he asked quietly. Mara didn't answer. She didn't need to. She was already tracking again. Rourke stayed where he was, crouched behind a tire, watching her like she was something dangerous. Not physically, conceptually. This wasn't supposed to be possible, not from her. Another Marine went down near the front, clutching his leg, screaming for help. Mara saw it. She didn't ask. She pivoted. The angle was wrong. Too cluttered. Too many obstacles. She shifted, inch by inch, exposing herself just enough to see. Maddox reached out, instinctively grabbing her shoulder. "Don't," he said. "You'll?" She shrugged him off, not aggressively. Gently. "I've got it," she said. Her voice was still calm, still level. She adjusted. She fired. The shooter behind the burned-out sedan collapsed. The wounded Marine screamed again. Not in pain, in relief. Two Marines rushed forward, dragging him back behind cover. One of them looked at Mara like he was seeing her for the first time. Not as supply, as something else. something he didn't have a name for. Rourke crawled closer without realizing it. "What the hell are you?" he whispered. Mara didn't hear him. Or maybe she did. She just didn't answer. A Marine beside her muttered, "She hasn't missed." Another whispered, "She's not even breathing half the time." Someone else said, "I've never seen this." Rourke shook his head. "It's still luck." "Has to be." Mara fired again. And again. Each shot was the same, clean, controlled, no wasted movement, no wasted sound, no wasted breath. The radio crackled. Enemy falling back. A Marine laughed once, sharp and disbelieving. "They're scared," someone said. Maddox didn't take his eyes off Mara. He watched her shoulders, her hands, the way she shifted weight. He had seen hundreds of shooters. None like this. A Marine slid closer and started reloading her magazines without being asked. Another held up cover. Another leaned in, spotting, pointing out distant movement. They were forming around her, instinctively, protectively, Rourke noticed. His jaw clenched. "Don't crowd her," he snapped. The words surprised him, even himself. Mara didn't notice. She fired again. A distant shape dropped. Someone whispered, "That was over 500 meters." Maddox lowered his binoculars slowly. "She didn't even ask for the range," he murmured. A Marine near the front shouted, "They're pushing again." Mara was already moving. She pivoted, repositioned, recalculated. Her breathing slowed. Her finger hovered. Then she froze. Maddox followed her gaze. "What is it?" he asked. "Trap," she said. One word. No explanation. She watched. She waited. Then she fired. Not at a person. At a shadow. The shadow collapsed. Two more figures scrambled. She dropped them both. The Marines near the front stared. "How did she—" "She saw something," someone said. "Something we didn't." A Marine crawled up with another canteen. Mara took a sip, then another. She handed it back. Her hands didn't shake. Her face didn't change. Her eyes didn't leave the scope. The battlefield had become her quiet. That was what unsettled them. This should have been chaos. This should have been panic. For her, it was order. Rourke whispered, "This isn't right." Maddox glanced at him. "Define right," he said. Rourke didn't answer. Another Marine called out, "You're saving our asses, Supply." Mara didn't react. She fired again. A wounded Marine screamed near the far side of the street. He was exposed. Pinned. Mara tracked the angle. It was bad. Really bad. She waited. She shifted. She exposed herself just enough. Maddox reached for her again. She didn't let him stop her. Crack. The threat dropped. Two Marines sprinted, dragging the wounded man back. He sobbed, not from pain. From relief. Mara blinked. That was all. Rourke stared at her. Not with contempt, with something closer to fear. "How are you doing this?" he whispered. She didn't answer. The radio crackled again. Enemy retreating. A Marine laughed, shaky and disbelieving. "We're still alive," someone said. Mara didn't celebrate. She didn't lower the rifle. She didn't smile. She just kept watching. Because that's what you did. Not when you were lucky. When you were trained. This was no accident. The gunfire had thinned, but the air still felt sharp, like it could cut. Mara stayed where she was, eye to the scope, breathing slow, scanning rooftops that no longer moved. Around her, Marines whispered, checked magazines, dragged wounded men to safer cover. No one touched her. No one interrupted her. It was as if an invisible circle had formed around her without anyone agreeing to it. Then a new voice came over the radio. Not panicked, not rushed. Calm. Convoy Bravo, this is Overwatch 6. I have eyes on your position. Maddox stiffened. Say again, he replied. A figure appeared at the edge of the street, moving low, flanked by 2 Marines. He wasn't wearing flashy gear. No dramatic posture. Just a captain's bars on his chest, dust on his sleeves, and the kind of stillness that came from years of learning when not to move. He crouched near Maddox. Captain Hayes, he said. I've been watching your sector. Maddox nodded toward Mara without taking his eyes off the rooftops. Then you've seen her. Hayes looked. Not for a glance, for 10 full seconds. He watched how she held the rifle, how she breathed, how she shifted weight, how she waited. Something in his posture changed, not shock. Recognition. He stood slowly and walked toward her, careful not to break her focus. He stopped just behind her shoulder. Mara didn't look back. She didn't have to. You're not guessing, Hayes said quietly. Mara said nothing. Hayes leaned closer, just enough to see her hands. The way her finger rested, the way her wrist aligned, the way her cheek pressed into the stock, his voice dropped another level. You were trained before you ever put on this uniform, he said. Maddox turned. So did Rourke. So did everyone within earshot. Hayes didn't raise his voice, didn't make a show of it. You weren't trained by a range instructor, he continued, and you weren't trained for competition. Mara finally blinked. Just once. Hayes straightened. You were trained by someone who expected you to survive, he said. Silence swallowed the street. A Marine whispered, What does that mean? Hayes looked at Maddox. She's not a hobbyist, he said. She's not lucky. And she's not new. He glanced back at Mara. You've been doing this longer than most of us, he said, not a question. A statement. Mara didn't deny it. She didn't confirm it. She just kept watching the rooftops. Rourke's mouth opened, then closed. Maddox felt the meaning settle into his chest like weight, not dramatic, not explosive, just heavy. The kind of truth that doesn't need explanation, the kind that rearranges everything around it. No one laughed, no one spoke. No one even breathed too loud. And in that silence, something broke open. Not her secret, their assumptions. Everything they thought they knew about her collapses. The worst wave didn't announce itself with noise. It arrived with intention. Mara felt it before anyone said a word. The air shifted. The movement patterns changed. The scattered figures she had been tracking began to move with purpose instead of panic. They're regrouping, she said quietly. Maddox turned to her. Where? Everywhere, she replied. Then the first rocket streaked out from between 2 buildings, slamming into the street near the front of the convoy. The explosion threw Marines sideways, sent debris skittering across the asphalt, and punched a fresh hole into what little cover they had left. Another followed. And another. They're pushing, someone yelled, not scattered fire this time. Coordinated. Mara pivoted, scanning, her mind already building a map. She saw the source barely visible, a long, narrow window 3 buildings back, reinforced, shielded by angles most people would ignore. She didn't announce it. She just adjusted. Maddox followed her line of sight, then froze. That's over 600, he muttered. Mara inhaled, then stopped breathing. Her finger rested on the trigger, and waited. The window flickered. A shape moved. Not fully visible. Not enough for most shooters. Enough for her. The shot she took wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It didn't echo like thunder. It was just another controlled crack in a war that had already forgotten what silence sounded like. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the rocket fire stopped. Not slowed. Stopped. Mara was already moving again. 2 new figures emerged, sprinting low, carrying something heavy between them. Explosives. Maddox swore. They're trying to collapse the building. Mara shifted position, crawling forward an inch at a time until her shoulder was almost exposed. Rourke reached out without thinking and pulled a piece of twisted metal up to shield her. "Don't move," he whispered. Not to her. To himself. Mara's eye never left the scope. The angle was wrong. The distance was wrong. The timing was wrong. She didn't complain. She calculated. She waited. She fired. The first carrier dropped. The second froze. Mara adjusted. She fired again. Both figures fell. The object between them rolled harmlessly into the dirt. No one said anything. Not a cheer. Not a word. Just stunned breathing. More movement. Closer now. Faster. Mara's hands didn't shake. Her face didn't change. She kept working. She fired. Shifted. Fired. Shifted. Her world had become a narrow tunnel of precision, and everyone else moved around her like she was the axis of it. A Marine slid in beside her, reloading her magazines with shaking hands. Another leaned close, spotting, whispering distances without being asked. Rourke crouched behind her, his body angled outward, scanning for anything that came near her position, not because he was told. Because he had decided. A shot rang out from somewhere distant. Too close. Rourke flinched. Mara didn't. She fired again. And again. A Marine whispered, "How is she still calm?" Maddox didn't answer. He didn't know. The last real threat came quietly. A lone figure moving along the far wall, trying to flank, trying to end it. Mara caught the movement. Barely. She adjusted. The angle was impossible. The distance was worse. She didn't speak. She didn't hesitate. She exhaled. And fired. The figure collapsed. The street fell still. Not suddenly. Gradually. Like a storm passing without warning. One Marine laughed, breathless and shaking. Another sat down hard, helmet clutched in his hands. A medic shouted that the wounded were stable. The radio crackled. Enemy retreating. No one cheered. No one shouted. They just stared at her. Mara kept scanning. Another 10 seconds. Then 20. Then she exhaled fully. Slow. Controlled. She leaned back slightly, tension leaving her shoulders in quiet increments. And only then did she move. Not to stand. Not to announce anything. Just to shift the rifle down. Carefully. Deliberately. Like it was something fragile. Like it mattered. She lowered the rifle. The fighting didn't end with noise. It ended with absence. The sudden lack of gunfire felt heavier than the explosions ever had. Smoke drifted slowly across the street, no longer chased by bullets. Someone coughed. Someone else laughed once, short and disbelieving, like they couldn't quite process that they were still breathing. Medics moved through the convoy, hands steady, voices low. Tourniquets were tightened. Bandages were pressed. A wounded Marine squeezed another's hand and whispered, "You're good." "You're good." The words were soft, almost fragile. Mara stayed where she was. She hadn't changed posture. She hadn't straightened up. She hadn't stood to receive anything. She just sat there with the rifle resting across her knees, eyes still scanning out of habit, breathing slow. One by one, Marines approached her, not in a group. Not dramatically. Individually. Hastings came first. He didn't say anything. He just nodded once, hard, like he was afraid if he spoke he'd lose control of his voice. A medic passed her and murmured, "Thank you," without stopping. Another Marine paused, took off his helmet, wiped sweat from his face, and gave her a quiet nod before moving on. Rourke stopped last. He didn't meet her eyes at first. Then he did. His jaw tightened. He opened his mouth. Closed it, then nodded. Once. And walked away. No one apologized. No one explained. They didn't need to. Mara didn't respond to any of it. She didn't smile. She didn't look embarrassed. She didn't look proud. She looked the same. Quiet. Still. Present. Maddox approached her, careful, like he was stepping into unfamiliar ground. "You did good," he said. Mara looked up. "Okay," she replied. That was it. Not humble. Not dramatic. Just honest. He nodded, like he understood something he hadn't before. Around them, the convoy slowly rebuilt itself. Radios were checked. Vehicles were repositioned. Wounded were loaded. Life, stubborn and ordinary, began to move again. Mara stood. She slung the rifle back the way she had found it, careful, respectful, like she was returning something borrowed. She went back to the supply crates, picked up her clipboard, checked her manifests. 556, 762. Smoke grenades, water, batteries. Her hands didn't shake. Her voice didn't change. She had not become louder. She had not become bigger. She had not become anything new. She had simply been revealed. And maybe that was the hardest thing for them to understand. That courage doesn't always look like shouting. Sometimes it looks like waiting, watching, and stepping forward only when no one else can. True strength does not announce itself. It waits until it is needed. Stories like this rarely make the headlines. They don't come with speeches or medals on camera or crowds chanting a name. They live in the quiet spaces, in the moments between chaos and calm, where someone steps forward without asking to be seen. There are people like Mara in every unit. Quiet professionals, watchful, disciplined, carrying more than anyone realizes. They don't talk about what they can do. They don't announce who they are. They just wait, ready, until the moment demands everything from them. And when that moment comes, they give it. Not for praise, not for attention, but because lives depend on it. If this story moved you, if it reminded you of someone you served with or someone you love, take a moment to honor them in your heart. These stories matter. They keep memories alive. They remind us what courage really looks like. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more FOB veteran stories. These stories keep the courage alive for generations to come.